I never thought the person who would betray me the most was not a stranger or a business rival, but my own sibling. My name is Nora, and this is the story of how the person I trusted most tried to steal my dream, business, but instead of walking away defeated, I found the sweetest form of revenge. It started with a dream, a very simple dream. For as long as I can remember, I wanted to build something of my own, not just a small side project, but a real business that reflected who I was, my creativity, my work ethic, and my belief that even the smallest idea can grow into something beautiful. My parents never believed in it. They wanted me to play it safe, take a normal job, and stop wasting time chasing what they called fantasies. But I refused to give up. My younger brother Evan was different, or so I thought when I first shared my idea with him. He smiled, listened, and even encouraged me. He said, "Nora, you have always had the heart of an entrepreneur. You can do this." Those words meant everything at the time. Because when your own family does not support you, even one person standing by your side feels like the world. I spent years saving up money, working odd jobs and sketching out business plans late into the night. Every step felt impossible, but I told myself it would be worth it. Eventually, I opened my first small store. It was nothing glamorous, just a tiny space with peeling paint and mismatched shelves. But to me, it was a palace. It was mine. At first, things were rough. Some days, not a single customer came through the door. I stood behind the counter staring at the empty aisle, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Other days, I sold just enough to keep the lights on. I remember crying in the storage room one night, my head in my hands, thinking, what if they were right? What if I really cannot do this? But then something changed. Word of mouth began to spread. People liked what I was offering. My store slowly became part of the community. Customers returned, bringing their friends. My little idea started to grow like a seed, finally catching sunlight, and with each passing month, I felt more confident. That is when Evan suddenly became more interested. He started dropping by the shop more often, asking questions about sales expenses and future plans. At first, I thought it was sweet that he cared. He even offered to help stock shelves, greet customers, and run errands. I let him in because he was my brother and I trusted him. What I did not know was that Evan was not helping me out of love. He was studying me, watching every detail, learning how I managed things, and most importantly, looking for ways to get ahead of me. I remember one conversation so vividly. We were sitting in the back of the shop eating takeout after a long day. I told him, one day I want to expand. Not just this one shop, I want to open more locations. Maybe even create a brand people recognize. He nodded, but there was a flicker in his eyes I did not notice. At the time, almost like a spark of greed. The months rolled by, and business kept improving. By the end of that year, I had saved enough to seriously think about opening a second location. It was the proudest moment of my life. For the first time, I felt like my dream was real, not just something I whispered to myself in the dark. But around that same time, Evan's behavior began to change. He became secretive, taking phone calls outside and hiding details from me. He stopped volunteering to help at the store and instead asked more pressing questions about finances. One night, curiosity got the better of me while he was in the kitchen. I glanced at his open notebook on the table. What I saw made my stomach twist. Inside were sketches, plans, and notes almost identical to mine. My ideas, my strategies, even my timeline for expansion written in his handwriting. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. It was as if he had copied my brain. I confronted him that night. Evan, what is this? Why do you have all of my plans written down like they are yours? He did not even flinch. Instead, he smirked and said, "Business is business, Nora. You are too soft to make it big. You will always be stuck in a little store. I'm going to take this idea further than you ever could." My heart sank. This was my brother, the same person who once cheered me on, who promised he believed in me. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The betrayal did not stop there. Within weeks, Evan had somehow secured investors. He used my very own strategies to pitch a new business idea, claiming it was his creation. My jaw nearly hit the floor when I learned that he was opening a store just 3 blocks away from mine. When the grand opening came, I forced myself to walk past his new location. Bright banners, glossy shelves, and a crowd of customers lined up. Outside, it was everything I had dreamed of, but built on lies and theft. The worst part? My parents showed up to support him. They stood at the front, smiling and clapping like proud cheerleaders. The same parents who once mocked me for chasing this dream now praised Evan for being bold. I stood there across the street clutching my bag so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Rage burned inside me, but so did heartbreak. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Every ounce of trust I had left in my family shattered, but even in the middle of my despair, I whispered one promise to myself: this is not the end. I will not let him win. And that was the beginning of my plan. I thought losing my brothers. Trust was painful enough, but watching him steal my dream and parade it as his own was unbearable. Every day his new store seemed busier, louder, more glamorous. People who once walked into my shop now crossed the street to his and O. Every time I saw his smug face in front of that store, shaking hands with customers and investors, it was like a knife twisting deeper in my chest. The betrayal was not quiet either. Evan rubbed it in at every opportunity. He would walk into my shop, lean against the counter, and say things like, "You should really update this. Place Nora customers," like a modern touch. "Maybe you should come check out my store for inspiration." The arrogance in his tone made me want to scream, but I did not. Instead, I stayed quiet. I listened. I observed. Because anger can make you reckless, but silence can be powerful. My parents did not make things easier. They bragged about Evan at family dinners, telling relatives how ambitious he was, how successful he was becoming. When they turned to me, they would say things like, "You should learn from your brother. Maybe you would be doing better if you thought bigger." They did not realize I was already thinking bigger. Much bigger than Evan ever could. One night, I sat in my small office staring at the numbers sales were dropping. The competition was fierce. Investors were ignoring me, flocking to Evan instead. By all appearances, I was losing. But deep down, I knew something he did not. He might have copied my ideas, but he did not have my heart. He did not have my resilience. That was the night I decided to rebuild. Not just my store, but myself. I started taking business courses online, staying up late into the night to learn strategies, marketing, and finance. I saved every extra penny, cutting back on everything. No vacations, no fancy dinners, not even small luxuries. I poured everything into growth. Slowly, my efforts paid off. I launched a small online store alongside my physical shop, reaching customers far beyond my neighborhood. It started slow, but then orders began trickling in. Then hundreds, then thousands. I was exhausted running on coffee and stubbornness, but for the first time in months, I felt alive. Meanwhile, Evan was flying too. Close to the sun, he expanded too quickly, opening multiple locations without proper management. Investors loved his flashy personality, but they did not see the cracks forming underneath. His employees were unhappy. His costs skyrocketed, and his arrogance blinded him to the storm brewing ahead. I, on the other hand, kept working in silence. No announcements, no boasting, just steady growth. My online store took off, and soon I had enough to quietly open a new location. Not 3 blocks away from him this time. I chose a prime spot downtown where traffic was high and demand was endless. The opening was simple, nothing flashy, but within weeks customers poured in. They loved the authenticity, the care, the personal touch I put into everything. Unlike Evan, I was not chasing quick money. I was building trust. Months passed, and while Evan was busy plastering his face on billboards, I was quietly expanding. One store turned into 2, then 3. My online sales became a backbone funding everything. I needed. My brand was no longer just a shop. It was a name people recognized and trusted. But I still kept quiet, because the sweetest revenge is not served loud. It is served in silence until the moment it is undeniable. Of course, Evan did not notice. He was too busy throwing parties, showing off his cars, and bragging to our parents about how he was leading the industry. Every time I heard him talk like that, I bit my tongue, because I knew what was coming. Then came the day I had been waiting, for my lawyer called with the news: an opportunity to acquire a controlling stake in Evan's company. He had overextended himself, taken too many loans, and investors were pulling out. His once shiny empire was crumbling, and he did not even know it yet. I signed the papers without hesitation. In one stroke of a pen, I became the majority owner of the very business my brother had stolen from me. The irony was too sweet. He had mocked me, betrayed me, and tried to erase me. But in the end, his greed handed me the keys to his empire. I did not tell anyone right away. I wanted to savor the moment to plan the reveal carefully. Because sometimes, justice is not just about winning. It is about showing the people who doubted you that you were never weak, never small, and never destined to fail. And so I waited for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. But before I share what happened next, I want to pause here and say this. If you are listening right now, never let betrayal define you. Never let the people who laugh at your dreams convince you to give up. Stay silent, stay focused, and let your success speak louder than their doubt. And while you are here, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mortal Revenge. Because stories like mine remind us all that karma has a way of coming full circle. Back to Evan, the reveal happened on a day I will never forget. He had called for a staff meeting at his main office, trying to boost morale as things began. To slip, the room was full of employees, investors, even our parents. Because of course he wanted to show off, he stood at the front, grinning like always, trying to convince everyone that everything was fine. And then I walked in. The room went silent. Evan's grin faltered. He stuttered, "Nora, what are you doing here?" I smiled, calm and collected. I am here because as of today, I own this company. Every branch, every asset, everything you thought was yours now belongs to me. Gasps filled the room. My parents' faces went pale. Evan looked like the ground had disappeared beneath him. For once, he had nothing to say. And in that silence, I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. But my story did not end there. Because revenge is sweet, but the aftermath is even sweeter. The silence in that office was deafening. Evan's face turned red, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for words but finding none. My parents exchanged confused glances as if they could not process what I had just said. And then one of the investors, a tall man in a dark suit, stood up and said, "She is right. Nora is now the majority shareholder. She owns this company." The room erupted. Employees whispered. Some looked relieved, others looked shocked. And Evan, he looked destroyed. "Impossible," he spat out. "This is my company. I built it from the ground up." I raised my chin and replied calmly, "No, Evan, you built it on stolen ideas. You used my plans, my vision, my work. You might have fooled people for a while, but you could not fool the truth forever, and now all of it has come back to me." For the first time, the arrogance in his eyes melted away, replaced by fear. He tried to argue, but his voice cracked. "Mom, Dad, tell her she cannot do this. Tell her she has no right." But my parents were speechless. They had spent years praising him, dismissing me, and mocking my efforts. Now they were staring at undeniable proof that the daughter they had overlooked had outsmarted them all. I turned to the crowd and said, "Starting today, things will change this company. We'll no longer run on lies and shortcuts. We are going to rebuild trust, treat employees with respect, and honor the customers who gave us their loyalty. I may not have been the loudest person in the room, but I have always been the most determined." Applause broke out. Not from everyone, but enough. I saw relief on the employees' faces. They were tired of Evan's empty promises. They wanted stability. They wanted real leadership. Evan stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. My parents followed after him, calling his name, but I did not chase them. I did not need their approval anymore. That day I had reclaimed everything that mattered to me. In the weeks that followed, the truth spread quickly. People learned how Evan had stolen my ideas, how he had betrayed me, and how his greed had nearly destroyed the company. His reputation crumbled. Investors stopped taking his calls. Friends distanced themselves. The very spotlight he craved turned into a harsh glare that exposed every flaw. As for me, I worked harder than ever, reorganized the business, closed the failing branches, and rebuilt the brand on honesty and quality. Sales soared, and soon the company was more successful than it had ever been under Evan. Customers trusted me because they knew I cared. Employees respected me because I treated them like people, not tools. One afternoon, months later, Evan showed up at my office. His once polished suit was wrinkled, his confidence gone. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in spirit. He sat down across from me and muttered, "I just wanted what you had, Nora." I thought if I could take it, I would finally feel like I mattered. I looked at him, my heart heavy. "Evan, you could have built something of your own. You could have worked with me, but you chose betrayal. And that choice has consequences." He lowered his eyes. For the first time, he did not argue. He did not insult me. He just sat there broken, and in that moment I realized something. Important revenge is not about destroying the other person. It is about reclaiming your power. And I had already done that. I did not need to humiliate him further. I did not need to drag him through the mud. The truth had already done that for me. Instead, I said, I hope one day you learn that taking shortcuts never leads to real success. I hope you find your own path because this one, it was never yours to begin with. He left without another word. And that was the last time I saw him. My parents eventually reached out trying to mend things, but the wounds ran deep. I was not cruel, but I did not let them back into my life the way they wanted. I had built something stronger than their approval I had built. My own family, through friends, employees, and customers who believed in me, people who stood by me not because of blood, but because of loyalty. Years later, when I looked back on it all, I realized that betrayal had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It hurt. Yes, it broke me in ways I cannot fully describe, but it also pushed me to grow, to fight harder, to become the person I was always meant to be. And so if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Never let someone else's doubt define your worth. Never let betrayal be the reason you give up. Instead, let it fuel you. Let it shape you. Let it be the fire that turns you into something unstoppable. Because at the end of the day, the sweetest revenge is not seeing your enemy fall. The sweetest revenge is standing tall, unshaken, while they realize they never truly had the power to break you. And that is exactly what I did. I still remember that Christmas as if it were yesterday, the cold winter air outside. The glow of streetlights reflecting off the snow and the feeling of being utterly invisible in the people I once called my family. My name is Stella, and that Christmas changed everything. For years I had believed in family. I believed that the people who gave me life, who were supposed to love and protect me, would never let me down in the moments that mattered most, but I was wrong. That year I had planned everything a carefully wrapped gift for each of my parents, hand-selected, presents for my siblings, a home filled with warmth and joy. I had even spent weeks preparing a special dinner, one that I hoped would bring everyone together. But when the day came, they never showed up. Not one phone call, not a single text, not even a passing message to say they would not make it. I waited, hoping it was just a mistake, that they were caught in traffic or busy with unexpected errands. Hours passed. The lights on the tree twinkled. Mockingly, the scent of roasted turkey filled the empty house, and still no one arrived. At first, disbelief washed over me. I could not understand why they would abandon me on a day I had always thought was sacred, a day for family. My chest tightened, and I felt the familiar sting of betrayal. I tried calling, sending messages, but silence was all I received in return. My family had chosen to ignore me, to abandon me, and I felt every bit the rejection, as if I had been erased from their lives. I cried that night, sitting in the quiet, empty house surrounded by gifts and decorations meant for people who no longer cared. But amid the tears, something else stirred. A quiet, burning determination. They thought I was alone, powerless, and heartbroken. They did not realize that their abandonment had lit a fire in me that nothing could extinguish. I decided then that I would never again rely on their validation or their presence to define my worth. I would prove that even in the absence of their love, I could create a life of beauty, success, and joy. I started small. I focused on my career, pouring every ounce of energy into projects that others dismissed or overlooked. I worked late nights, weekends, holidays, all of it fueled by the memory of that empty Christmas. Years passed. Slowly, I began to see the fruits of my labor. Promotions came, opportunities arose, and my savings grew. I invested wisely, learned the art of strategic risk, and built a foundation that no one could shake. But through it all, I never forgot that feeling of abandonment. It became my secret motivator, the quiet voice that reminded me I could never depend on anyone but myself. I started buying properties, small at first, then larger, more luxurious spaces. Every purchase felt like reclaiming a piece of the life I was denied. Every successful deal, every accomplishment was a quiet victory against the family who had left me alone that Christmas night. And then came the day I purchased the mansion, a sprawling estate with high ceilings glittering, chandeliers, and a view that stretched endlessly. Across the horizon, I walked through the rooms for the first time, feeling a profound sense of triumph. This was my sanctuary, my testament, my answer to the betrayal I had endured. The irony was not lost on me. While my family spent years ignoring me, assuming I would falter, I had built a life they could only dream of I did, not need their approval, their presence, or their love to succeed. I had created everything on my own piece by piece, fueled by a determination they had inadvertently given me. On the first Christmas, in my new mansion, I set the table, decorated the tree, and prepared a feast not for them, but for myself. And as I sat down that night, I realized something the loneliness I had feared was replaced by pride, joy, and the freedom that comes from standing entirely on your own. I was no longer the abandoned girl I had been. I was Stella, fully in control of her life, her happiness, and her destiny. After that first Christmas alone in my new mansion, I knew that my life would never be dictated by anyone else again. The pain of abandonment had transformed into a quiet determination. I was no longer the vulnerable girl waiting for validation. I was a woman, building a life on her own terms. I threw myself into my work. I took on projects that others considered too risky or unworthy, and I poured myself into them with relentless focus. Nights blurred into mornings as I studied, planned, and executed. I learned the ins and outs of business, finance, and investment. Every success built my confidence. Every setback taught me resilience. The world I had entered was not easy opportunities, often felt just out of reach, and failures were bitter, but each challenge became a stepping stone. While my family continued their lives, oblivious to my growth, I quietly acquired knowledge, experience, and wealth. They had abandoned me, but they had unknowingly given me the perfect fuel to become unstoppable. I started with small investments, local businesses, properties, and modest ventures that required patience rather than flashiness. I watched these investments grow, reinvesting every penny I earned into new opportunities. I became strategic, calculating and careful, understanding that true power comes from patience and foresight, not rash actions. Years passed. My small successes snowballed into something greater. I acquired larger properties, launched my own business, and developed a reputation for reliability and intelligence. Each step forward was quiet. I never flaunted my progress, never sought approval, never needed anyone's acknowledgement. My family assumed I was struggling, still the same girl they had abandoned years ago. The irony was intoxicating. They mocked the life I had chosen, assumed I was weak and alone, and carried on with their trivial concerns, completely blind to the empire I was building in the shadows. My every decision was calculated to maximize impact. Without alerting them, I had become a master of strategy, patience, and subtlety. Eventually, my efforts bore fruit. I controlled businesses, owned properties, and had wealth far beyond what my family could imagine. Yet I remained calm, never revealing my growth, waiting for the perfect moment to show them that their abandonment had created their own undoing. I observed them from a distance, noting how life treated them differently than it had treated me. Their arrogance, carelessness, and assumption of my failure only strengthened my resolve. I was not seeking revenge through confrontation or cruelty. My revenge would be quiet, undeniable, and devastating. In its simplicity, they had underestimated me, and I had built a life that left them powerless to affect it. Finally, I prepared for the first step in the reveal. I invited them to what they believed was a casual holiday gathering under the guise of reconciliation. They expected a friendly conversation, perhaps an apology, or a casual celebration. They had no idea that the quiet, abandoned girl they had dismissed was now the one in complete control of her life, and indirectly in a position of power over them. As they arrived smiling and unaware, I felt a calm satisfaction no one expected. The silent strength of the person they had abandoned. I greeted them politely, with warmth and civility concealing the power I now wielded. I let them talk, boasting about their trivial victories, unaware that I had surpassed them in every meaningful way. I began to speak carefully, recounting the story of that Christmas, the night they abandoned me. I shared my feelings of betrayal and heartbreak, but also emphasized the determination and resilience that their abandonment had sparked within me. I spoke calmly, every word measured, allowing them to feel the weight of their choices without the need for shouting or anger. Then I revealed the empire I had quietly built, the properties, the businesses, and the wealth they had assumed. I could never acquire. I showed how every step they took, every mistake, had been an opportunity for me to rise there. Shock was immediate. Faces turned, pale mouths fell open, and a silence filled the room that could not be broken. "This is the life I have built," I said calmly, "while you ignored me, abandoned me, and assumed I would fail. I worked, I learned, I invested, I grew. And now the life I dreamed of is real and entirely mine." My family's reactions were a mixture of disbelief, shame, and fear. They had assumed they held power over me, but the tables had completely turned. The quiet, abandoned girl had become unstoppable. They had no control, no influence, no ability to diminish what I had achieved. I did not gloat. I did not mock. My calm presence, my confidence, and the undeniable reality of my success spoke louder than any words could. This was the revenge I had sought, not through cruelty, but through resilience, determination, and silent power. By the end of the evening, it was clear the family who had abandoned me on the coldest, loneliest Christmas had underestimated me completely, and in doing so, they had paved the way for their own irrelevance in my life. The day of the final reveal arrived. Years of quiet determination, sleepless nights, and relentless effort had led to this moment. I was not nervous. I was not anxious. I was calm, collected, and fully in control. My family had abandoned me on a cold Christmas night, and now it was time to show them the life they had assumed I could never achieve. I invited them to my mansion. Under the pretense of a holiday celebration, my parents and siblings arrived, oblivious to the transformation I had undergone, still assuming I was the same girl they had left alone years ago. They were smiling, relaxed, confident, and completely unaware of the storm that had quietly grown behind their backs. As they entered, I greeted them with warmth and civility. The mansion glimmered with lights. A feast was prepared, and everything looked like the perfect scene of reconciliation. They assumed this would be a casual gathering, perhaps even a moment to rebuild bridges. I allowed the moment to settle before speaking. I wanted to share a story. I began softly, a story about a Christmas when I was left alone, abandoned and forgotten by the people I trusted most. I was heartbroken, shocked, and yes, even afraid, but I learned something important. That day, betrayal does not have to destroy you. It can teach you resilience, patience, and strength. Their expressions shifted. My mother frowned, my father's jaw tightened, and my siblings exchanged uneasy glances. They had not expected such calm introspection. I did not let that Christmas break me. I continued. I worked quietly, studied relentlessly, and built a life they thought I could never achieve. I invested, wisely took calculated risks, and created opportunities for myself while believing in nothing but my own determination. I then began revealing the results of my efforts. Every property I had purchased, every business I had acquired, every achievement I had quietly accomplished over the years. I laid it out. Before them, their disbelief was immediate. They whispered to one another, unable to comprehend that the girl they had abandoned had become a woman of influence, wealth, and power. You have done all this?" My father finally stammered. I nodded calmly. "Yes. Every success, every asset, every accomplishment was built quietly without your support, without your guidance, without your presence. While you gambled, ignored, and dismissed me, I worked, I grew, and now I am standing here, fully in control of the life I dreamed of." The room fell silent. The reality of their failure and my triumph sank in. Their arrogance, their assumptions, their neglect, all of it had been their undoing. I did not need to shout, to accuse, or to argue. The truth of my success was more powerful than any words could be. I continued, my voice steady and composed. "You thought leaving me alone would destroy me. You thought abandoning me would weaken me, but instead it taught me to rely on myself, to trust my own abilities, and to create a future that no one could take from me. That is the true power of resilience." My siblings looked shocked. My mother's eyes welled with tears, and my father's face was pale with regret. They realized in that moment that their choices had consequences far greater than they had imagined. They had underestimated me completely. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. This is my life built on determination, patience, and strategy. I am proof that betrayal does not have to define you. It can refine you, strengthen you, and propel you toward greatness. I hope that one day you understand the lesson that your actions taught me. Never take someone's future lightly, because The person you dismiss may one day rise, far beyond your expectations. No one spoke. The silence was deafening. Their powerlessness was evident. They had assumed they held control, but the tables had turned entirely. I had achieved what they believed was impossible, and I had done it without their help, without their guidance, and without their support. Months passed after that. Gathering, I continued to grow, expand and enjoy the life I had. Built my family attempted to reach out offering apologies or explanations, but I had learned my lesson. Forgiveness could exist, but it would not erase the years of neglect or the lessons learned from betrayal. My life, my choices, and my happiness were now entirely in my hands. Reflecting on everything, I realized that the true power of betrayal lies not in the pain it causes, but in the opportunity it creates. Abandonment taught me resilience. Neglect forced me to grow independently, and betrayal gave me the determination to create a life far beyond what I could have imagined if I had relied on anyone else. That Christmas, the one they abandoned, me became the catalyst for everything I achieved. What I once feared as loneliness became freedom. What I once mourned as rejection became motivation, and what I once saw as the end of hope became the beginning of a life, defined by strength, strategy, and unshakable independence. If there is one lesson I hope anyone listening takes away from my story, it is this: betrayal and abandonment are not the end. They are a chance to rise, to grow, and to create a life that no one can take from. Your true victory is not about revenge, it is about reclaiming your power, achieving your dreams, and standing strong even when the people who were supposed to care have turned their backs. And in the quiet of my mansion, that first Christmas, I finally understood that I had everything I needed. I was free, unstoppable, and unbreakable.